Good evening and welcome to the June 10th Planning Board meeting for the town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. We do have a quorum, and we'll start with roll call to make sure we can hear everyone. Kevin, I got you muted still. Okay. You there, Kevin?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Bruce here.
Yep.
Who's here?
And Will, Greg, Mike.
Mike's here.
Greg, I think your microphone might be muted. I see your lips moving, but I don't hear anything.
No, I got you, Mike. I don't have Kyle. I think you're still muted, Kyle. And Greg, you're still muted. Can I unmute you from here? Let's see.
You should be able to.
Okay. Yep. Greg, you there?
Just a minute.
Nope, you're there, Greg.
I'm here.
Yep.
Hey.
You hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, this is a public proceeding unless the board specifically votes to go into executive.
It froze up. We lost Rob.
Did you lose me?
He froze up.
Barb, are you online by chance? Okay. Your internet connection is unstable.
I kept using this three little buttons. When it wasn't, it was just the full screen.
Yeah. It's the upper right button.
Oh, it's actually down lower. It's down on the bottom. I had a little like a thumbnail. And when I was in the thumbnail, there's an icon down below the screen.
Well, we can see you moving now, Bob.
You can see me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can't see anybody.
Was on for
Wait a minute. Okay, am I back?
Yeah.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay. But the no pic. Okay. The board works for a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We have the minutes from the March 11, 2020 minutes. We have, for old business, we have a tabled application of Port Harbor Holdings. We have a public, followed by a public hearing for the applicant Eleanor Botker on a lot division. Following that, we have a high wire hydroponics request for a project extension. Any other planning communications, and followed by adjournment. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances or state law. All persons speaking, including representatives of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand, state their name, address. I guess you can remain seated. Address and affiliation with the application, either for, opposed, or neutral. All persons shall address the chairman. Any conversation must be held in abeyance until after the board has formally adjourned. After the board votes on the merits of each application, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Because the notice of decision may substantially affect any appeal rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting with regard to a specific application not leave until the board has completed its discussion. Appeals from adverse decisions must be filed with the Superior Court or within 45 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual right to file any such appeal, you must be certain that the board records evidences of your appearance this evening in opposition and the basis of your opposition.
Robert,
Yes,
I'm going to ask people to mute all their microphones if they're not talking. Someone has a bad mic.
okay. Should I just mute them?
They can mute their mics if they're not talking.
Okay.
I'm not sure who has the bad mic, but if I find out, I'll
We're
let you know.
trying.
Okay, all the, everyone's muted.
Okay.
So now what do we do?
You can continue with the meeting, and if someone wants to talk, they just unmute their mic.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, first order of business is for the approval of the March 11th, 2020 minutes. Is there a motion?
Excuse me, Bob, can we back up on your reading? We don't have the extension for Highwire on this agenda. We have no information from them.
Yeah, Mike is going to introduce that. Excuse me, Jim is going to introduce that under Planner Communications.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll move the minutes from the previous meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Next order of business is the Port Harbor Holdings. Does for the board, do you all have the memo from Will on dated June 8th, 2020?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. So to start with, I guess, Will, we could just ask you to give us a quick run through.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just start with a brief summary of where we've been with the application. So the application was formally submitted back in January 2020. There was a public hearing on February 12th, followed by a site walk on February 22nd. There was a second limited public hearing on March 11th. And then I think they were scheduled for another meeting on April 8th. However, that meeting was delayed because of the COVID-19 issue. So here we are at this virtual meeting on June 10th. As of the last meeting on March 11th, there were a few outstanding items that the board requested the applicant address, including a monitoring plan for the parking. There was delineation of the boat access adjacent to the swim area for the Indian Point campground. There was, they had not received their DEP NRPA permit yet. And I think there was another item that wasn't covered in their May 7th meeting, but it was related to monitoring the flows and the septic system. So with that, as the applicant has again made a submission on May 7th, including a narrative letter and a plan. The plan addresses those first three items. Basically, they provided a parking monitoring plan, which describes how they plan to monitor the parking, and they've outlined a time period beginning in July 2020 and ending in October. So basically, it would be this season, and how they plan on monitoring that with adding a security camera, recording camera that would they would review the recordings after every weekend and holiday during that period, and then submit a summary report to the town. And recordings from that camera would be retained for a couple months. So if the town had any questions, then the code officer could go down and review those recordings as well. Obviously, I guess the board may want to consider whether that this season is the right season for monitoring parking, given the situation that we're in here at the moment. But anyway, that was the essence of their monitoring plan for parking. They also talk about applying to the state of Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry to install several new buoys to delineate the swim area and delineate where the boat traffic would go here adjacent to the Indian Point campground. And then I believe they've also submitted their DEP NRPA permit. The narrative also describes that they've reached out to the Indian Point Campground Homeowners Association and offered assistance in terms of potentially relocating the swim float and some subsurface boulders within the swim area. So as part of this meeting, given that it's been some time since our last meeting, basically I prepared for the board what I'm calling a final review checklist, which basically kind of pulls out all the different review criteria for the project, put it in a tabular format, which with 3 columns of whether the standard has been met, not met, or not applicable. I figured that would make it relatively easy for the board to kind of go down through the various criteria and check off whether they feel that standard has been met or not met, or whether it's not applicable to the project. So with that, I think that's really all I had to add tonight. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Will, and thanks for that checklist graphic. That will be extremely helpful. Rob, over to you. You to introduce, and if you could address, make sure you just your letter, any information in it.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep, I think you're good.
Good. Okay, so as Will had stated, there were 3 outstanding items that we had to look at. First one was developing a monitoring plan. Will didn't touch on it, but one of the things that we know that we got a late start here because of COVID, and what we propose to do is monitor through October, but then monitoring again in 2021 from the beginning of the season through July, so that we get a good representation of what would happen in the parking. One thing we've noted is that we have been busy. It's been good business so far up at the marina since things have opened up a little bit. So, but we do plan on monitoring into next year. Relative to the delineation of the boat access, we have reached out to the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. Tim Thurston, who handles the markers within the lake, and Heather Siders, who does some of the administrative stuff on that. They are looking at the plan that we have submitted, which is basically the plan that you all got. Typically, they don't like the outer buoys that we've shown on there, 200 feet past the shore. So they wanted to have a little discussion on that. If you remember, our property juts out a little bit more than where the swim area is. And we just thought it would be better to have those buoys even with the ends of our dock and whatnot. Also, because there was a shallow area there. They are going to get back to me within the next several days on that, but they don't see a major issue. It's just where we end up putting them in the end. We did get our MDEP permit, and that copy that was included in your package. We have had several conversations with the HOA, trying to assist them in what may need to be done relative to relocation of their float mount that's below the water there, moving that for them, and also offering to have somebody go and move some of the boulders within that area to make it a much better area for swimming. Also, the client has reached out to several entities to offer up slips in the marina, those being the Lake Association, who handles the milfoil abatement on the lake, the town fire department, and also the inland fisheries department. We thought it would be good to have the public presence there. We know that one of the concerns was that people may not be doing what they should be. So we figured if we have a slip there for the inland fisheries, a warden service, that would help things out a bit. Other than that, everything's pretty straightforward, we believe. I think we've handled all of our fire comments. There's some conditions that they want included. I believe a plan has been submitted or soon to be submitted for the fire sprinkler system and whatnot. And we're all set to go, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Okay, I guess I did miss one thing along the way. We do need a motion to take the project off the table officially. So could I have that motion from somebody?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Second, and is there any discussion? Wait, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So left over, I have in my notes, Mike was in some environmental concerns concerning the loon nesting. Are you pretty happy with what has been presented now as far as that's concerned? Yep, you're muted. Hang on, Mike, you're muted.
I have one concern about the monitoring of the parking. The thought occurred to me listening to the planner's review and listening to what Rob McSorley had to say, that because of the COVID-19 problem we have going on, usage of the parking lot and usage of the slips may be constrained throughout the season and perhaps into next season, not knowing really what the virus is going to be doing. And the thought occurred to me, what if people who customarily rent slips decide to continue to rent slips so that the marina's income stays relatively stable from rental of slips for their income, but people decide not to visit the lake because of the virus, and so they don't come out and park. So there may not be a strict correlation, or there may be a strict correlation between the income of the marina from slip rentals for the year and the amount of parking activity. And I'm not convinced that the monitoring in this current virus season is going to give us a true look at what the parking activity is going to be during a fully active season when there's no virus. I just throw that out for conversation purposes. I don't have an answer for that, and I'm not attempting to to shoot down the monitoring program. I think the applicant has done as good a job as we could ask, considering the fact that we don't have parking standards for the area. But that's my concern, so I throw that out and ask what people think about that.
Could I comment on that as well?
Yeah, give me Mike, I didn't catch your first answer to whether or not you're happy with the environmental. Balloons problem, are you okay with that now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yep, go ahead.
Regarding the parking and monitoring the parking, I guess I'm a little concerned about what happens if, I think the monitoring's great, by the way, but what happens if we end up with parking overflow out on a 302? Do we need some sort of condition of approval that says that if that were to happen, then the number of people allowed in the parking areas would be limited? Because, I mean, it's one thing to have a monitoring program, but what if it turns out that there's problems, but yet we don't have any procedure in place to address that?
Yeah, could that be a condition that they have to come back with a proposal on how to address problems that are shown from the monitoring plan?
And also, didn't we have some discussion about, I think Mary was in on this one, that if there is in fact problems with the parking, it would directly relate to the amount of slips that could be rented? Was that?
I don't recall that discussion, but that maybe is a way to address it.
Or expand the parking lot, come back for expansion of the parking lot.
Right.
Looks like Rob wants to.
It was that if there is a problem with parking out on Route 302 and overflow, and that the parking lot is not adequate, then the applicant had to come back with a revised plan to address the overflow and the concerns as they stand at that time. And there didn't seem to be really any other way for us to handle it, because we don't know what the concerns are going to be, and so we can't set up a plan to address something that hasn't happened yet, that we don't know what the circumstances are. I think that's pretty much the way we left it.
Yep.
That sound right, Bob?
Yes. Rob, I'm sorry, I just caught the hand now. Go ahead, Rob. You're still muted, Rob.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. Relative to what's happening with COVID-19, and what we would see as a reflection, like I said, we have been busy. They've already turned away people who want to rent new slips. That's what the demand is. With the ability to get out and outside, this is one of the better things that people have been thinking of doing, is going out on the lake and boating. They have been busy. They've been selling boats, and people are ready to lease more slips. So
that could very well be, that could be true.
So, but we didn't know that was going to happen. So that's why in our monitoring, we wanted to make sure that we were handling it right. And so we have proposed to monitor into the next season to make sure that we get a good reflection of that. Relative to overflow onto 302, that will not happen. Client will not allow that to happen. And if there's a situation with parking, they will free it up by having their employees park somewhere else, shuttling them in, and then creating more parking. Like we said, this is our business. If we don't have the parking there for the people who lease the slips, we're not going to be very successful. It doesn't make sense that we wouldn't provide the parking that we need. But, you know, whatever needs to be done to adjust the parking in the future, we're going to do.
Thanks, Rob. Kevin, you also had some issues about parking. Are you okay with what's?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm glad they're going to go into next season. I mean, Rob's probably right. It's going to be a high season now this year because of the ability to avoid some virus contact out in the open water. So it'll be good to see what happens this year and next year, and you can compare the two.
Okay.
Let me ask this question. What if there's a camera failure in the middle of a monitoring month? Is somebody going to be, it says that the results are going to be reviewed every month and reported to the town, but is somebody at the marina going to be responsible for checking that the camera is working every day during that month?
We are going to look at, we're going to do this on a weekly basis. So if there's a camera problem, it would be caught within 1 week. So I don't think you're not going to lose a entire month.
Do the cameras have any kind of an interlink into the monitor with some type of a warning that the camera is not active? Maybe that's something that could just be incorporated into the camera setup. It seemed to me that would be a pretty easy functional piece of electrical interfacing to accomplish, and just might be smart if you don't lose that week.
We can look into it, Bruce, and
Okay.
see if that's available option and whatnot. Certainly, we don't want to go and have to monitor any longer than we need to. But
no, but you don't want to lose a week or two of monitoring, and then that.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the parking issue, who we haven't heard from, Ed, Kyle, Greg, are you guys all okay with that, what the parking setup is in the monitoring system?
I'm okay with the parking plan and the monitoring system.
Kyle?
I am as well.
Greg?
Yeah, I think it's a good plan. I think that they put the effort in to make sure that they're being transparent down there. I do agree with the other comment. You know, if we come back, this does become a problem, we should probably have some way to address that. But I think they're doing everything they can with what they have and to do the monitoring. I think that's a step more than I expect them to take. So I'm happy with what I'm hearing, but I think that we should also consider, you know, if this does become a problem and the monitoring proves that it is an issue, you know, having a recourse. But other than that, I'm liking what I hear elsewhere.
Okay. The third issue that was left over was the boater swimmer safety. Rob has addressed it with the buoys. Are we okay with that? That was one of those that was still kind of a concern with the board at when the end of our last meeting.
I have one question though for Mr. McSorley. I think if you're going to be relocating submerged boulders, does that have to be approved by DEP, or can they do that as a matter of right because they have a beach there?
I believe as long as you're not displacing it from the lake, you do not need a permit, but I'll confirm that.
Yeah, if
They've
you have to go see
done
them
that
for
work
the-
in the past.
Yeah, if you have to go see them for the floats, you could maybe just bring it up and mention.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the concern I had.
Say if they're moving any boulders, I believe that would be a PBR from, a permit by rule to move any boulders, which they have done in the past in front of their marina. To move any rocks in the water, they probably would have to get that.
The last time they did it, the contractor who did it got a PBR.
Yep, but that was for 2 years, and I believe you're on your second year now. I don't know where the time limit is on that permit.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing we would have to look into and deal with it at that point.
Yeah.
Are the boulders big enough that they inhibit boat travel above the boulders? That they may need to take into consideration a redefinition of the safe waterways, or are these boulders, you know, small enough and deep enough that that's not really an issue?
They are fairly close to the surface, but they are on the opposite side of the swim area away from the marina. There's like a shoal going out there of boulders. There's pretty shallow water there.
I don't think that you're not removing the boulders for the marina. You're removing the boulders for the swim area. Is that correct, Rob?
Correct. The boulders over in the marina area have already been accounted for. And what we've done is we've just offered up for our neighbors that we would help assist them relative to the swim area, because towards the south a little bit, you have a lot more boulder area, I guess. We wouldn't take those boulders out that are about 200 feet out or so from, it's almost like a protection for the swim area to begin with. That's out in front of that area. Those would remain.
Let me throw this out. You know, when you're out riding in a boat, you're supposed to be astute enough to be looking over the bow of the boat for rocks that are upcoming and going slow enough so you can avoid the rocks when they come into view. My concern would be during the off season when the buoys are down and the boulder has been relocated. I think he would certainly want to relocate it so that the top of the boulder is no closer to the top of the water than it is now. And even though people are supposed to be looking out for the boulder, you don't want to increase the chances of a hazard condition by, you know, having the boulder put on a higher elevation on the floor of the lake than it currently sits on. I guess I'd ask that you kind of pay attention to that.
Yep.
Okay, so am I correct in assuming that we're all happy with the boater swimmer safety buoys that are being in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Other concerns with just on the boater swimmer safety issue?
I'm good with it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I think
I'm
the only thing that we have if I can summarize this, is concerning the parking. We are happy with the monitoring system, but there is still some concern as to what will happen if the parking if drifts out onto 302, what the recourse is. Is that correct? Are we still concerned a little bit with that, or are we okay with?
I don't know how we can judge how much of a concern we have and how we're going to react if it hasn't happened yet. I don't see how we can sit here and make up a plan to deal with it. That's one of the Achilles heel aspects of not having a parking standard for the area per se, and having to rely on the process we're currently going through. If it becomes a problem, the applicant has to submit a plan to address it, and we have to thrash around with it at that time. That's my understanding. I don't see what else we can do.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Are there any other kind of concerns from any of the board members that we want to address before we go into the specifics items?
Nope.
No.
No? Okay.
Will's waving his hand here.
All right.
So the one other item which wasn't in the letter, but was talked about in the previous meeting was monitoring flows into the septic system. And I believe my recollection is that Mr. McSorley suggested that they would put a flow monitor on the system to monitor the flows into that septic system to make sure that the septic system was sized adequately.
Correct. We would meter the water into the building there in the amount of flow that it puts in. The flow that comes from the commercial building is not much. It's really what might come from the ancillary building. And so what we had said is we will put a meter on that, and then we will deal with the town CEO, whoever that might be in the future. But and rectify that situation. And we've also had conversations with Portland Water District about it because they have concerns, and we want to make sure we take care of them.
Just for the record, that discussion is contained on page 4, paragraph K, under septic waste disposal. What Will brought up is actually right here in writing under that paragraph in the letter that we have that's dated June 8th, 2020, the final review checklist.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, after hearing Mr. McSorley's comments, yeah, I have been in contact with the state. There was a little bit of concern because they're going to be monitoring it requires to be monitoring for a year. Again, that may be something that we can deal with as it comes along, but they were a little hesitant on going that long without having to have them being compliant with current shoreland subsurface wastewater as they are now. But it sounds like he's been in touch with it. I know Portland Water District has been in touch with me about it. So they had a little bit of concerns as far as the water monitoring, maybe too long of a period to go without being compliant. But I think that we may be in discussions with Mr. McSorley and the Jordan Bay Marina, and kind of figure out how we're going to deal with it maybe in that interim as far as what they may be required. So I think it's something that we could just work through rather than it is. I mean, it already is a part of conditions of approval, so that they be compliant. So it's just something that we could work through the year. I feel anyway.
Okay, though, then from the board, I'm going to work through Will's memo. So if you could kind of flip to that, starting with the site plan review standards and under paragraph A. Vice going through for a motion for step-by-step here. We'll talk about each, I'll just mention each of the big subheadings. If there is any concern of any of those subheadings, if you would just raise your hand or yell out or something and we can talk about it. So the first thing on my list, just to make sure we're all in the same place, is I have under subparagraph A, the preservation of landscaping. Is that everybody with me on where I am?
Yep.
Okay. So from our discussion, the preservation of landscaping, I would say that that standard is met. Paragraph B is the relation of proposed buildings to the environment. There's no new buildings, so we'll go with met. Vehicular access says the applicant has coordinated their design efforts with the town of Raymond, fire department. Wayne, can you confirm that for us, that the fire department's happy with vehicular access and how the parking will set up?
Yes, based on the plans, Stantec, yes, we would be. Stantec and Sebago Technics, because we've received plans from both. But yes, we would be happy.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. So I'm going to go with it. That standard is met. Okay, so now the big one, the parking and circulation. I think everything that's been proposed, we've kind of agreed to. I don't think there's anything that we need to add to that. Is there something that somebody is still concerned with? I tell you what, why don't I just there's the parking monitor plan, includes the installation of security cameras to monitor the parking area, recordings reviewed every weekend and holidays.
Should we add language in there about the monitoring from, I believe he said next March, next July 2021? Rob mentioned that maybe that language should be in there or added to it.
Okay, so
I missed that, so I'll add that in there.
you'll add that in there. Okay. So I am going to check that the applicant has met that standard. Is there any concern, leftover concern concerning the parking? Okay. Surface water item, Echo surface water drainage. The plan includes only a minor excavation. So that condition is met. Flipping to the next page, Foxtrot utilities. There are no new utilities proposed except for the fire suppression system. The new docks is requested by the fire department. Was this the trench that we did not have on the last plan? Rob? The trench that was going out to the docks was not on the last plan. Did it get onto the revised?
It was on the last plan. We had revised the plan from the initial meeting we had. It was Bruce had brought that up and we had shown it, and we showed the erosion control measures around where it would be trenched.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I believe there was a cross section also of the trench provided.
So I am going to check Met for that. Special features, there are no special features, so it's kind of NA. Exterior lighting, the new lighting is bollard lighting down on the docks and the slips. So we're comfortable with that. I'm going to say Met. Yes, is there a comment?
Yes.
Okay.
nuts.
Emergency vehicle access, Wayne is okay with that, so we will check that as being met. Item Juliet, the landscaping, there's none planned nor needed, so that is an NA. Other considerations for Article 9 standards. In there is the narrative for the swim buoys. Also the narrative for the offer to move and relocate the slope. Anything else in that standard that we feel should be needed, is needed?
I don't know if this is the place that you would want the fire department's memo included in your findings of facts. Is this where that would fall in?
In the findings of facts, yes.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to switch to shoreline zoning standards then. Just as a quick review, just one more before we go. On my checklist, I have all of those standards being met for the site plan review for Article 10. Is that correct with everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to paragraph B for the shoreline zone standards. Minimum lot standards and setback is going to be met. That's nothing proposed. Principal and accessory structures, there are none, so that is done. Piers, docks, wharfs, bridges, and other structures and uses extending over and below the normal high water line of a water body or within the wetland. I think this is probably I should go through. Item 1 there, the existing dock will be extended and reconfigured as part of this project. No new access to the shore is proposed. The project does not interfere with existing developed or natural beach areas. The applicant has submitted main DEP application for the project. The dock expansion appears to be sized to accommodate the typical size of lake boats. All docks will be removed on or before December 1st. No new structures will be built on, over, or abutted the dock unless structures required direct access to the water. No structures constructed on the floats are proposed. No structures are proposed on the docks that would be converted to a residential dwelling unit, and no structures on the docks will extend 20 feet in height above the dock. The main DEP NRPA permit has been obtained for the construction of the piles, and no vegetation is proposed to be removed from this project. Are we okay with item Charlie?
No,
No? Bruce, is that a no?
I have no problem.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So that is a condition met. It's not a campground for Delta. Personal campsites are not applicable. Commercial, industrial use and marina is not included in that list of prohibited uses, so that is met. Parking area already exists and is not being expanded. Roads and driveways, no new roads or driveways are proposed, so that is met. No signs or signage.
Bob, let me throw something in there. I thought that the application was going to include some fire lane or no parking signs or something to that effect along the dock area. Is that correct?
The only thing I think that was being discussed was ADA access. And I think that's
the fire department wanted some no parking fire lane signs somewhere.
There are two areas on the plans that show no parking on it. One down near where the dry hydrant is, and one place where the road or the driveway was a little narrower. So we took out some of the parking as requested by Wayne.
Should we have that paragraph I just revised, for the final copy to reflect that?
Sure, I think it's on the plans, but we can add that. Well, we can add that in Gulf, can't we?
Yeah, I can add that in there, not a problem.
Okay.
Okay.
There are no new signs proposed. Item Juliet, stormwater runoff and flood protection. That includes only minor excavation on the shore, so I think that we're all okay with that. The septic waste disposal we've talked about, that's going to get monitored. And is there anything else under Kilo there that we're concerned about? The applicant agrees to upgrade if necessary. All right, I'm gonna check Met. Lima Essential Services, there are none that are proposed. The mineral exploration is NA. There's no agriculture is NA. Beach construction is NA. Timber harvesting is NA. Clearing and removal of vegetation for activities other than the timber harvesting is NA. Hazardous trees, storm damaged trees, or other dead tree removal is NA. Exceptions to clearing and vegetation removal requirements is NA because there is none being removed. Revegetation requirements is not, the standard is not applicable. Erosion and sedimentary control has been addressed.
Hey, Bob,
Yes,
this Scott, on that one, on the septic system,
yes.
one thing they do not have that I talked with the state that we don't have any kind of the maintenance agreement for the pumping. It should have been, we should have a copy of that as to how often and when they, how often they are supposed to come and check it, who's monitoring it. There should be some kind of an agreement there. We currently do not have one in the folder. They may have one themselves, I don't know, but it is something that is required.
Between the town and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a maintenance agreement between whoever pumps out their septic tanks and how often they do it as to when they're supposed to come and check to have those pumped. There should be some kind of agreement between who pumps it out and the marina itself. Which
Rob?
they already have. It may be a contract with the septic system, whoever pumps it out now, but we don't have anything here at the town of any kind of an agreement on that. We have no idea.
Based upon the flows that we see as part of the monitoring, we will come up with something on that. We have not had a big problem with that. I think it's been 4 to 5 years between times that it's been pumped. They did have one period that was less because they had a frozen line during the winter, but they've never had a problem with it. But we can come up with something on that.
I mean, it should have been in place before then, but still, yeah, as long as we get something, some kind of a,
I don't think it was a condition before. That's
no,
why.
it wasn't. It's something that came out ahead, and I'm just kind of throwing that out there that it was required.
Yeah. We can do it.
Scott, are you talking about the holding tanks too, or just the septic tank?
The holding tanks that are being pumped. Yeah,
Okay.
It's not the septic system itself.
So will we add that into Kilo and make it also a condition of approval? Is that?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll put it in there and we can make it a condition.
okay.
Don't we have an ordinance that
Thanks, Scott.
pumping septic systems? I think there already is an ordinance addressing pumping septic systems in the shoreline zone.
Well, there used to be, I mean, back in the day, yeah, you used to have to get it pumped out and when you used to get the slips as to when it was pumped out. Right now, Raymond does not have a holding tank ordinance, so it's not allowed. They got that in through a state permit. It wasn't through the town. The holding tank that they have.
You know, it could still be a condition. It's just
Yeah, it's not a big thing.
some redundancy. Anyway, okay.
We're up to item uniform erosion and sedimentary control. The applicant proposes the use of turbidity curtains during the actual pile driving. There's nothing else is going on land. I'm going to check okay with that. That's met. Soil minerals shore excavation is proposed as a new fire service to the docks. Oh, excuse me, minimal shore excavation. So I'm going to say that is met. Water quality. The project site is regulated by Maine DEP, multi-sector general permit. No new excavation on site. Improvements will impair water quality, so we could go with a met. Archaeological sites are done, and a public boat launch facility associated parking areas. The project is not a public launch. All right, so that completes. Look back here, that completes section 15 of the land use ordinance. Everybody okay with what we've gone through? Any objections? Okay. The last item is section 16 Delta, the shoreland zoning provision. Item 1 is will maintain safe and healthful conditions. The applicant has described emergency vehicle access and fire suppression improvements along with existing wastewater and fuel handling standards of practice. I know we've had some talk about this. Is everyone now okay? Seeing no objections, I'm going to check Matt. Will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentary to surface water. I think that's already been described, the conditions, so I'm going to go with Matt. Will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater. I think that's already been addressed and covered. Anybody with any concerns left over on that? Okay, so we meet. Will not have an adverse impact on the spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, birds, or other wildlife habitat. The DEP has weighed in on that, and they're okay. We okay? All right. Will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland waters. No visual buffers will be impacted by the proposed project. The applicant notes that the utility trench will be excavated to install a new fire suppression system, and the excavated area will be restored and stabilized. Concerns? Okay. Will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan. That's an NA. Will not adversely affect the existing commercial fishing or maritime activities. That's good. Will avoid problems associated with the floodplain, development and use. I think that's okay. Is in conformance with the provisions of section 15 of land use ordinance, which we've done, so it's there. All right, that's the end of the checklist. The one proposed condition for approval is the applicant shall submit a water wastewater usage monitoring plan for review and approval. Purpose of the plan is to evaluate the existing subsurface wastewater disposal system usage and capacity and determine if upgrades are necessary. Will, can we just probably add right into that one? That one, did you want to make another separate condition?
I would just add a separate one that basically that says the applicant shall provide a maintenance agreement to the town for pumping the holding tanks. Does that sound adequate to you, Scott?
Yep.
Okay, that's the end. Are there any last minute concerns or discussions? All right, Bruce, you're happy?
I'm happy.
Wow. All right, can I have a motion then?
I'll move for approval with the two conditions of approval for the holding tank maintenance agreement with the town and the septic field monitoring system as already written out.
Is there a second?
Second, Greg.
Who was that? Is that you, Ed?
Greg.
Oh, Greg. Okay. Seconded by Greg. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Okay, then all those in favor of approval? All those in favor?
This is Mary. For a remote meeting, you have to do a roll call vote.
Oh, thanks, Mary.
Yep.
All right. So I will go through. Roll call vote. Kevin.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Kyle.
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
And I vote aye, so it's unanimous. Motion passes. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, everybody.
Jim, you joined us?
I'm signing off.
Okay, Will, thanks very much, Will.
Thank you.
I'm signing off also. Bye all. Good to
Bye,
see
Mary.
you.
All right, the next is a applicant from Eleanor Botka. Did I pronounce that right, Eleanor? Close?
It's correct, but
Okay. Thank you. It's not what I usually do.
It rhymes with vodka, Bob.
I teach school. You can't imagine how many children would love to call me that.
Okay, Jim, would you take us through an intro?
Yes, this is before you this evening because in 2012, there was a consent agreement with the original developer of the private road, Mike Manning. At that time, I don't know the details. It was prior to my coming on here in town, but I believe because of the way the development was cut up with family members, it had to come back to the town because they might have been considered an illegal development because it didn't wait 5 years for the necessary lot divisions. And then the extension of the road never got approved. So in 2012, it did come through as a consent agreement. There was a plan for a private way, Whitney Way, which allowed for the development of the lots that were there at that time. One of the conditions on the plan at that time was any further lot divisions would have to come back to the planning board to be approved. Now, the interesting thing with this is how do we review this? Although I may have put in my memo and it may have been an error, I did follow the subdivision review criteria, and rather than me saying must meet the orders of those, it probably should say should be considered by the board. I don't believe that this is a formal subdivision application. It is really an approval of the condition for the lot division. So it's a little bit weird. I understand, but I do think that if we go through the private way standards and the subdivision standards, it'll just be clear for everybody to have a reason of why we should allow this division going forward. So what has transpired is that this is the end of Whitney Way. Mrs. Bodka owns a parcel that basically incorporates the whole end of the subdivision on both sides of the Hammerhead turnaround. What they would like to do is split a lot off and utilize the frontage on the Hammerhead to meet the proposed lot. They would have to extend the right-of-way limits, but not the physical roadway to meet that criteria. And I should also note that in 2012, because of the length of the road, they had to get stormwater management permit from the DEP. Because they're not extending the road, we wouldn't have to amend that at this time. However, if you look on your plan, there were some stormwater buffers that applied to the lot that they're creating here now. Those would stay in place. And in addition to that, Mr. Sawyer has provided that they will do a drip edge treatment for the lot itself. That's pretty consistent with what we've made other lots do for end of lots divisions and things like that. So I think this is pretty straightforward. I don't see any real hiccups. I do have some items at the end here that just need to be cleaned up, but I think that those are relatively minor. But I will let the applicant speak and then we can have more discussion following.
All right, I get Mr. Sawyer.
Hello, yes, my name is George Sawyer. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. My name is George Sawyer, Sawyer Engineering and Surveying in Bridgeton. And I've been working with Mrs. Bodka on trying to get this division of her lot approved. She currently owns a house and lives in the house that's shown on your plan, and then down below her to the north, kind of, is where she wants to create this second lot. Both lots meet the minimum requirements for your town as far as road frontage, acreage, that type of thing. We did a soils test on there. There's certainly suitable soils for a septic disposal system for a single family residence, which is what she is proposing to put on there. As Jim mentioned, we've shown some buffers that part of them were on the approved plan, the Manning plan, which again, as Jim mentioned, was not a subdivision approval. It was a private way extension plan. So We showed those on there, and we in fact extended the buffer that was shown on that plan up near the road so that it extends the full width of her lot from the hammerhead over to her westerly sideline. That provides some extra treatment from runoff that's coming from her developed portion of her existing house lot. This would seem to meet all the requirements that as far as providing the stormwater treatment. We showed on there some wetlands. The wetlands that are shown were actually taken from the Manning plan. We did not go out and redo the wetland delineation. Those were taken, having been on the site myself numerous times. I would certainly agree that the wetlands are properly identified. I'm not a wetlands expert myself, but having seen the difference between wetlands and uplands over the numerous years that I've been in business, I would agree with the delineation. As Jim mentioned, he went through and provided you folks and us with a memo, kind of going through the various items on your checklist or whatever. I've talked with Mrs. Bodka about that. We don't see any issues with any of the items that he brought up in any way. I think most of, as he mentioned, most of the items that he asked for a few additions to the plan as far as erosion control and a few other notations, that type of thing. I believe also asking for a definition of the where the driveway might go in and some signs at the end of the road as far as not to block it as far as turnaround or emergency access or that type of thing. That does not seem to be an issue. And Ms. Eleanor, if you have something to add, by all means, step in here. The other item that we did show on the plan was for the existing driveway to her existing house to be widened at the end of the road. It won't be, the intent is that it won't be paved any further, but we widen the driveway somewhat to provide some better turnaround area for especially like a large truck and or for whoever's plowing for snow storage off the end of the or the existing driveway that's there. I guess that's kind of it in a nutshell to this point in the discussion. So I guess if you folks have questions, we'd certainly like to go ahead and discuss those points.
Okay, thanks, George. This is a public hearing, so I am going to open the public hearing at this time. Not exactly sure how all this works. There's no one on the screen. There's nobody that's on my little rundown list here. I guess there was a call-in number. Is Mary still around? Oh, there you are, Mary. So if somebody would call in, you would get them. Is that correct? Okay. So we'll leave the public hearing open for a while we continue the discussion. And if somebody starts to call in, then we can address that by waiting around.
Okay, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. All right. So to the board. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a question. Should we have some topo lines on the plan so we can see the slope of the land and the direction of the drainage flow for the record?
I don't.
Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was just gonna say, I think once you're out there, it's pretty self-evident that everything goes to the north-northwest in a direction, pretty evenly sloped back there. I don't see any real cause, especially with this plan, Bruce, because they've got a buffer up against the street and they also have one across the rear of the lot. So we have.
It just the location of the buffers is indicating to us where the drainage is going.
Right.
What you're saying.
If I might add, that the slope, as Jim said, and you've said too, Bruce, it is draining from the road to the northwest across the lot. It's pretty consistent 4 to 5% slope, pretty gentle slope down across the whole lot. We didn't try to do any on-site topo. It's pretty thick in there. This place was cut a few years ago, quite a few years ago, and it's now pretty well grown up with a bunch of small trees. I didn't see the need. There was no special features or whatever that I felt needed to be shown through topo. So that's why
Okay.
we really didn't do it.
Yeah, Jim's happy with that. I'm all right.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, Bruce, is having there is a condition that we pin the buffers so that the homeowners don't accidentally go in there and cut those. I mean, we typically have been requiring that more and more, just so the homeowners are aware where the buffers are. I mean, once the plan leaves you and goes out in the real world, the builders and the homeowners don't always, know exactly where those buffers are. So by pinning them, it gives us more field information of exactly where they are.
Yeah, and another thing that we've done oftentimes is we'll put some signs up facing with the back. If you're walking in to the buffer, you'll see a sign saying "wooded buffer, do not disturb," something to that. We find that's very helpful to do, and we certainly can do that along the defined edges of the buffers.
On the board, does anybody else have any concerns? Discussion?
Second.
So Jim, I know this area for the development has a lot of history. The road, being on the board when we did this, the board.
I saw your name on one of the signatures there, Bob. Unfortunately.
Yeah. The road that's in is now up to minor subdivision standards?
Correct. It actually would meet town standards. They built a substantial road through there with adequate shoulders. This would suffice for a private road of 10 or more lots under our current standards.
And the lot that we're addressing was a lot done in the original subdivision or the original proposed.
Yes, it was part of the original development.
Right.
It was the last lot at the very end.
Last lot, okay.
And it was one of the lots that was subject to the condition that it would have to come back to the board.
Right.
Yeah, if I could just comment there, I think it's a kind of somewhat of a key item to note is that, as Jim mentioned in this thing, when his early opening discussion, this was never reviewed, as far as I can see in talking with other people, that never reviewed as a subdivision. It was review was done as a private way extension. But in the first condition of approval, this lot being a larger lot, 6 acre, 7 acre lot, there was a stipulation, a condition put on there that this, and I think there was 1 or 2 other lots, that they could not be further divided unless they came back to the board. So Mrs. Bodka has owned this property since 2012. So it would seem if it wasn't for that condition, it seems that we would not have had to come back to the board. But with that condition, we've come back to the board asking for the approval of this dividing of the lot.
Right.
Not creating a subdivision per se, just a division of her lot, her large lot.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just for the board's edification, the board at the time was concerned, and maybe if you're as well, George, the board was concerned at the time as how the lots were being set up and divided, and seemed to be an end run to get around the subdivision rules, and that's why the board went with no subdivisions of any of the lots without coming back to the planning board.
Right. That was my understanding. Yes.
So Wayne, are you okay with the turnaround? Yeah, Hammerhead as proposed.
yes, as long as we put in the fire lane signage, that would work.
Okay. Are there any other, I could go through the history of this, but I think it's a pretty straightforward division. Are there any concerns from any of the board members?
None here.
I just
Brett,
have
you
one
okay?
comment that one thing that is a little bit important is, prior to any building permits, I have in there as a condition, we must make sure that they become part of the homeowners association and that they also will take responsibility for any of the work. It'll have to be underground utilities. I believe it's all underground utilities in there. And I think the transformer's on the other side of the street, so they'll have to cut through the street. Any of that disturbance is on the homeowner to repair, not the association.
Right, that was in your memo, I believe, wasn't it, Jim?
It was on the, Bob, just for your reference, it was on page 6 and 7, just for recommendations.
I am, to tell you the truth, I did not print that out, and I'm a little leery switching the computer right now and losing everybody. So
don't mess it. It works. Don't mess with it.
Right. If somebody could, has got that handy and could make that motion with Jim's recommended conditions, that would be very helpful. Does anyone have, did anybody get Jim's?
Yeah, I
How
have.
about Jim? Could you just run through the conditions for us?
Yep, sure will. I made note, homeowners association execution, reference to conditions of the original approved plan, terms of approval expiration, home lot improvements will add erosion controls. Hold on a second. Tree buffer limits permanently marked, reference wetland mapping delineation date, E911 address confirmation, utility improvements, responsibility of homeowner for repairs, and all application fees must be paid in full prior to issuance of a building permit. Those were note requirements. And then as far as plan revisions, I requested a well location or exclusion area shown, driveway location shown, and setback limits with buffers accounted for.
Okay. So we have a motion with those as our conditions of approval.
So moved.
So moved. I think it's a fairly long list of conditions of approval, which we don't normally address, but I think in this case, they're pretty minor.
Yeah, they're relatively minor. They're just note additions and minor plan revisions, really.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Second, Bruce is seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, so roll call vote. All those in favor, start with you, Kevin.
Excuse me, can I just bring up one point before you make your vote here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. There was a memo here from the fire chief, Wayne, I think is still on the board here.
Yep.
Regarding a requirement or asking for a fire suppression system, sprinkler system in the house. I would like to make sure that we get that identified, either yay or nay. We don't feel that is should be part of this approval, in the respect that we're not part of a subdivision. I think that's been established. It's a small house. She has a house designed. It's a single story, 1,500 square foot house. Mrs. Bodka is going to move out of her house that she's in now and live in this new house. So she has it designed, 1,500 foot single story house. And we feel that this is a request. I'm not sure if it's a request or a requirement that we feel we should have to meet. There's nothing in your ordinance at this point that requires that, as far as I can see, for a non-subdivision application. So I'd like to make sure that we get that defined before we move too far into this whole project, as far as reviewing and approvals.
I guess my only comment there is I don't have anything from the fire department making that recommendation. Does anybody else have a copy of that paperwork?
I don't.
No.
If it's not submitted to us as the planning board, it seemed to me that we can't even consider it. Bob?
Well, I agree. I think it probably comes from Wayne with the, it's one of those things that this would be, or should have been a subdivision, or could have been on, all those sub things, and it was walked around that. And I think under those, I think we have to live with those decisions that have been made that made it a non-subdivision, in which case all the other houses in this non-subdivision were exempt from in-house sprinkler systems. So I don't see a requirement that we do that, nor anywhere in the ordinances that we would require that. George, we do, just for you, we normally always do require the sprinkler systems whenever we are dealing with a subdivision, and it has been the board's for years now to always go with sprinkler systems. But I think Wayne, in this case, Wayne, it is truly one of those exceptions that we really should not be imposing that on the lot. If this was any other lot split, it would never come to the planning board, and there never would be a consideration for that. And then, so I'll give that over to you, Wayne, for your 2 cents here.
Okay. Actually, there was a memo that was submitted. I don't know why the board doesn't have a copy of that, but there was a memo submitted. And we were asking to meet the water supply requirements that we always look to in subdivisions.
Right.
And like we have done a number of times since I've been the inspector, is on these lot splits, is it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend the money to put in a tank or a fire pond, but we require the sprinkler system. We have done that on other occasions, and that's where this comes from.
Have we been doing that on lot splits?
I
Yeah,
think on,
go ahead.
I could just chime in for a second. I think on the other ones, though, the ones that come to mind were the ones we did like up on Roosevelt Trail. Those were kind of duplexes that tripped the subdivision requirement.
Right.
This case it's got so many weird loopholes in it. I personally don't see how we could apply the subdivision standards to this one. While I would like to, I just don't see how we can technically. So that's my 2 cents. And I think on those other ones, they tripped subdivision with the development itself. In this case, they don't trip subdivision.
And that would be my opinion on the situation here. I know in other towns that we work in, they have a similar requirement for a subdivision, but again, this one is not part of a subdivision. As far as it looks like a subdivision, smells like a subdivision, but it's not a subdivision. So I don't see that it meets the requirements for anything, or that part of the requirements, if you will.
Okay, Bob, we currently have a motion on the table that's been seconded. Do we need to withdraw the motion or amend the motion to include language that the fire suppression system is not required and that the fire department letter is not applicable?
I don't think we need to amend it. I think that our motion, that's not included in our motion. And I think we've clarified. So it's just not, it's not in the ordinance. It's not applicable. It's nothing that.
So the motion that we currently have on the floor that's been seconded, we can just vote on it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I would just like to say that the applicant has been agreeable, though, to the placement of the no parking signs at the end of the street.
Right.
Okay. All right, back to you, Kevin.
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Kyle,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and I go aye as well, so it's passed unanimously.
Okay, so this is the first time I've ever done this, and it's been an interesting and long process. And as a teacher, I've learned probably more than I could ever have learned if I just read it. So I thought I was nervous to come on. I'm not nervous in front of my children, but I was in front of you. And I thought, if I don't say something, I'll wish I had. So I want to thank you very much for approving it, and for Scott, you meeting with me all the time. And George, I can't thank you enough for what you've done. And so I just thank you all.
We're
And-
always happy when we find happy customers.
Well, happy home.
Customer. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, folks. I guess I should bring a plan down to the town office, and do you folks want to sign this? Or is
George,
it
why
not a
don't you-
subdivision that you don't need to sign?
Well, it is a plan division, so we probably should sign it, George. And I would just recommend that you send me a PDF with all the note and plan changes per the conditions. And then once it's done, then I'll have you come on in and we can have the board stop by the town and sign the plan.
Okay, sounds good.
Or if it works out, it's the next month, it's the next month. We'll figure it out.
Okay, whatever. That sounds good. We'll see about getting on that. I'll get you a PDF in a short time frame. So if there's any additional stuff, we can get it taken care of.
All right, I'll also close the public hearing that someone has called.
Yeah,
Right now.
yeah, we're learning.
All right, it was well done for your first go. I'll commend you on that.
Oh, thank you.
And my first go too. Take care.
Yep.
Jim, do you want to take us through the high wire hydroponics?
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask Scott to chime in here a little bit too, because we were kind of going back and forth of where we wanted to position this and if we had to put out public notification. My understanding is that when we've done the extensions, they do not require public notifications because they're just a request to extend the plan and all the terms and conditions. Nothing new is being presented other than the terms of the start or the completion is being asked to be extended. In this case, this came to you folks back in, when was it, 2017, which was about the same exact time that we instituted the ordinance change for the expiration terms, approval terms of 2 years to start, 4 years to complete. You could come in for a one-time extension, which would give you 3 years to start and 4 years to complete. And then there was another caveat in that language, which was said that you could not have any more than 5 years to start or complete. I think we just put that in there to cover all our bases, which was good because in this case, it gives us a little bit of wiggle room. So they have requested it. Scott, I don't know if you got any feedback from the attorneys today.
I did. I talked to Phil Saucier, and he says even though, because it would be on the agenda, it's required to be in the public notice. Even though it's an extension, it would still require to be in the public notice, which would mean it would have to been out there before we could discuss it.
Right. So, I mean, we can discuss it this evening as communications, basically. It doesn't jeopardize them if they go on next month because their expiration is June 12th, and I think our next meeting is July 8th. So there's a little bit of wiggle room for them. But I just kind of give you a heads up. Basically, my recommendation was they've been 2.5 years. We haven't seen any start of any sort on this project. I understand that this spring has been totally blown out of the water with everything that's going on with the coronavirus, lack of people being able to get in touch with the town because of closures and restrictions. So my suggestion was to them was we'll extend it 6 months, which is equivalent to what they had from the beginning of the year to July. So we'll put it through to January 2021. And then the board, if they don't start or get substantial work going on this, can then say in 2021, this is dead, you got to come back for reapproval. And if they do start, how much do they get done? Are they serious, or are they just kind of, just dragging this out? So it gives you an opportunity again to look at this, to see where they are. Obviously, we don't want to restrict businesses from being able to develop, but at the same token, we got to toe some kind of line here where we just don't keep dragging it down the road. So, I mean, you won't make a decision this evening. It's just kind of put out there. So you can think about it. You got a month to think about it. We will probably recommend that they join us at the next meeting to just give us an update of where they are, to give us a sense of if they have any plans and when they could start. The other thing that makes this a little more difficult is, if you remember, the disc golf course they had down there has some conditions that are also tied to the development of high wire. So it gets a little more complicated with the tube developments then.
Is the other development done or in the works?
No, I don't believe anything's been done on that one either. So, I mean, they got 2 plans out there that probably, Scott, you and I should look at to see what the expiration is on the disc golf too, because that one's probably coming around again soon.
Yeah, we'd have to look. It's got to be getting there, because that came up quite quickly when I first got here. So, yeah.
But I think at some point we got to just, we keep moving the line back and we're giving them the benefit of the doubt. But at some point we got to draw a solid line. And I do understand that this year is a complete mess for anybody trying to get permits to do anything or start construction because of finances or because of inability just to communicate with towns. So I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt for another 6 months, but after that, we need to see something.
But your recommendation also was to give them 6 months, but to hold the end date.
Correct. Hold the end date, because I mean, if we give them 6 months, they can start now in July or August, something they can start.
Yep.
And then then if they do start and they get going with this and they happen to run out of time in next July 21st, because the completion date's coming up, at that point, you could extend the completion date if you see that they're making a full effort to actually complete.
Okay.
I got a couple questions. Has the applicant specifically requested the 6 months, and have they given you any indication of when they would like to actually start construction, assuming they get all their ducks in a row?
They asked for an extension. There was no terms of, I think they were just hoping to get an extension, basically, Bruce. They were agreeable to what I presented to them on the 6 month. But to your point, I did not hear one way or the other if they had any plans and when they would start. So that's a question you could ask them at the meeting next month.
Okay, you might be prepared to discuss that with them. Here's my concern, and I'm not trying to, to tie the hands of the applicant, and I'm sure we all want to be, reasonable within whatever bounds we can commonly agree on. If they don't start construction until early 2021, the dates as amended from January to July pretty much mean that, assuming they're thinking about constructing a pre-engineered metal building, depending upon how busy pre-engineered manufacturers are at any given point in time, it's pretty tough, even in the best of times, to get steel on the ground from the manufacturer in less than 6 weeks, and usually 8 weeks is kind of a customary lead time. If all heck breaks loose and everybody's really busy and the pre-engineered building manufacturer is quite busy, you can see lead times of 12 to 16 weeks. And if the applicant doesn't plan properly, unless he wants to start winter conditions construction of the foundation in January or February, he's going to naturally want to hold off until the middle of March, when spring thaw really starts to happen and things loosen up. And then if he runs into a long pre-engineered metal building lead time, he could find himself really rushing construction to meet that July date, because he won't be starting excavation for foundations till the middle of March. He orders the steel doesn't get there. Worst case, 12 to 16 weeks. It's going to be July before he sees the steel on the ground. So there could be some coordination issues that I think you may be want to discuss with him to make sure he doesn't get his, you know.
I
get-
think we can easily relay to them, Bruce, that we'd like to see some kind of scheduling of what they are planning. If we do extend this, what would be their plans and what would be their schedule? I think that's a fair question to ask of them
Okay.
when they come next month.
Okay, anything else? Any other
I
business?
don't. Scott, do we have anything else coming forward next month?
No, we have not received any interest in any kind of applications for a planning board. Not at this time. I mean, you and I talked about some issues that may come in front of the planning board, but we've got to kind of figure that out first. But right now I don't recall of anything coming in. And have you seen anything, Mary?
I've not seen or heard anything.
Okay.
Just for the board's enlightenment, the other issue that we have is we have a backlot driveway, which is getting early indications that this one's going to be complicated with the number of lots it could potentially serve. Scott and I have discussed this one in detail with the applicant, and the engineer is the same one that's doing high wire by coincidence. So it may be worthwhile, if nothing else, to maybe put it on there for some kind of discussion. At this point, Scott and I are both not really comfortable taking this one as a staff review. I think it has some merits to go to the board,
Okay,
but we'll work that out as we move forward into the July agenda.
okay.
Other than that,
Anything about town meeting?
What, Greg?
Anything about scheduling the town meeting?
I think they said they weren't going to have one in person this year. It was going to be a virtual town meeting. I thought I read that on the town website.
Mary, you know?
That is currently what is planned, that it will be a video.
That should be interesting.
so unless you folks have anything for us, that's all we've got.
All right, is there a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
You got to go by roll call, Kevin.
Aye.
Leave until we all vote. Bruce,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Kyle,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Mike, doesn't matter what you vote, it passed.